Welcome back to Kleppers Corner, Today in History, the only show where we look at one day on the calendar and realize, wow, humanity really loves doing dramatic things when everyone else is already thinking about Thanksgiving leftovers. November 27th is like the universe's annual reminder that history doesn't stop just because you're still in your sweatpants, questioning your life choices and debating whether cold stuffing counts as a vegetable. It's a day where martyrs get cut up, kings die inconveniently, empires collapse, crusades begin, and Alfred Nobel goes, oops, I invented explosions. Better create a prize. So buckle up, because November 27th is a cornucopia of chaos, tragedy, reorganization, religious fervor, scientific breakthroughs, wars over fertilizer, assassinations, and holiday parades featuring zoo animals who definitely did not sign the waiver. Segment 1. The martyr who was literally cut to pieces. St. James Intercisus wins the award for most intense way to make a religious point. On November 27th in the 420s, James, former favorite of the Sassanid king Yazdegerd, ends up getting the full deli slicer treatment courtesy of King Bahram V. His crime? Reconverting to Christianity after his mom and wife emotionally guilt-tripped him so hard he basically became the biblical version of, fine, I'll go. This man didn't just stand firm. He stood firm while losing fingers, toes, hands, feet, arms, legs, basically everything except the ability to deliver inspirational quotes like a medieval Tony Robbins. And the whole time, the Sassanids are cutting off limbs, and James is like, this is like pruning a vine. A vine. If I stub my toe, I file a lawsuit against gravity. But James uses dismemberment as a motivational poster. And shocker, his execution contributes to deteriorating Roman-Persian relations. Because apparently, nothing ruins diplomacy faster than a kingdom going, hey, maybe don't chop up our people like a holiday ham. Segment 2. Clovis I dies, and Europe immediately becomes a group project. November 27th, 511. Clovis I, the man who unified the Franks, defeated the last Romans in Gaul, converted to Catholic Christianity, and basically founded France, dies. And instantly, his kingdom becomes a property dispute worthy of a 90-minute episode of Succession, Barbarian Edition. Instead of primogeniture, which would have made things simple, Clovis goes full, everyone gets a slice, and his 4 sons carve up the realm like it's the world's least stable charcuterie board. So you get Theuderic in Austrasia, Clodomir in Orleans, Childebert in Paris, and Clothar, wandering around Soissons like the brother who destroys everyone's inheritance by outliving them. And thus begins Europe's favorite pastime, sibling warfare disguised as political strategy. This is the moment France and Germany basically begin their centuries-long argument about who left the stove on. If Clovis had just invented primogeniture, Europe might have gotten centralized government 1,000 years early. But no, he was like, let's do chaos. And chaos said, oh, absolutely. Segment 3. Emperor Maurice gets executed and the ancient world ends. November 27th, 602. Emperor Maurice, military genius, author of the Strategicon, friend of Persia, and man with the fiscal sense of a brutal accountant, gets overthrown by a mutiny because he ordered his exhausted troops to winter north of the Danube. And the soldiers responded exactly how you'd expect soldiers to respond when told to go die in the freezing wilderness. They revolted, marched on Constantinople, and crowned Phocas, the kind of leader who makes you go, oh no, we've made a horrible mistake. Maurice flees, gets captured, and is forced to watch his 5 sons executed before being killed himself. And if that's not enough trauma, the consequences reshape global history. Persia invades to avenge him. Byzantium collapses into 26 years of war. And by the time both empires are done punching each other, Islam rolls out of Arabia and goes, hey, the door seems open. That's right. November 27th is literally the day antiquity dies because one emperor tried to save on winter rations. Segment 4. Pope Urban II kicks off the Crusades with history's most intense pep rally. On November 27, 1095, Pope Urban II stands up at the Council of Clermont, looks at a crowd of knights who've been spending their free time stabbing each other for sport, and decides to give the most consequential motivational speech before TED Talks existed. He describes atrocities in the Holy Land, offers indulgences, invents a theological loophole where killing people becomes a form of religious fitness, and suddenly Europe goes from "we're bored and violent" to "let's invade Jerusalem." The crowd shouts "Deus Vult," which is Latin for "we're about to make some extremely questionable life choices." And the First Crusade begins. And, surprise, instead of calming Europe, this externalizes violence, destabilizes Byzantium, and kicks off centuries of holy war. This is like giving a pyromaniac a fire safety badge. Just because you redirect chaos doesn't mean it stops being chaos. It just gets a passport. Segment 5. Anders Celsius is born, and the world finally knows how cold it really is. November 27, 1701. Anders Celsius enters the world, and science goes, "Nice, we've got temperature now." Before Celsius, the world measured heat with whatever random system aristocrats came up with after drinking too much port. Celsius, obsessed with precision, goes to Lapland to figure out the shape of the Earth, confirms Newton was right, then invents a temperature scale backwards. That's right. His original scale had water freezing at 100 degrees and boiling at 0. Swedish winters were so brutal, he thought negative numbers were psychologically harmful. Honestly, respect. But after he dies, Linnaeus flips the scale, and now Celsius becomes the universal language of weather complaints everywhere. Thanks to him, every group chat in January can include messages like, "It's -20, send help," which is the true legacy of science. Segment 6. A vision in Paris leads to millions of medals and a new wave of devotion. November 27, 1830. Catherine Labouré, a novice nun, claims the Virgin Mary appeared to her and requested the creation of what becomes the miraculous medal. Picture Paris in the early 1800s. Revolutions, trauma, philosophy majors everywhere. The whole city decomposing under the weight of existential crises. And suddenly, this quiet Marian devotion sweeps France, distributing millions of medals and accidentally reversing the spiritual hangover of the French Revolution. It eventually helps pave the way for the dogma of the Immaculate Conception. It's one of those moments where religion goes, "Hey, Enlightenment, we're still here," and Enlightenment whispers, "Fine, but at least let's keep the fonts clean." Segment 7. The Battle of Tarapaca proves you can win a fight and still lose the war. November 27, 1879. The War of the Pacific rages in the Atacama Desert, also known as the hottest place on Earth except for Twitter. Chile attacks a Peruvian force. Peru, outnumbered, low on supplies, armed with vibes and stubbornness, pulls off an incredible tactical victory. They capture guns, flags, and pride. But here's the catch. No supplies, no logistical support, and Chile is about to bring friends. So Peru retreats. Chile takes the territory anyway, and Bolivia becomes permanently landlocked. This is the strategic version of winning the argument, but losing the divorce settlement. Segment 8. Alfred Nobel signs his will and tries to undo inventing dynamite. November 27, 1895. Alfred Nobel signs the will that creates the Nobel Prizes because he once read his own obituary calling him the Merchant of Death and went, "Nope, not how I want my LinkedIn to look." So he donates his fortune to reward humanity for being smart and peaceful, which is ironic since most human conflict at this point is powered by things he invented. His family hates the will. The king hates it. Lawyers hate it. But the world loves it. And now, every year, we honor scientists, authors, and global peacemakers, all because Nobel was having a bad morning and a crisis of conscience. November 27th, the day guilt became institutionalized. Segment 9. Bulgaria gets a treaty and a national identity crisis. November 27th, 1919. Bulgaria gets hit with the Treaty of Neuilly-sur-Seine, which basically says you lose land, money, pride, and access to the sea. Thrace? Gone. Western Outlands? Gone. Reparations? massive. Resentment, off the charts. This treaty helped set up the conditions for Bulgaria joining the Axis in World War II purely out of revenge. It's like the Allies took one look at Bulgaria and said, let's make this tiny country very, very angry. And shocker, they did. Segment 10. The first Macy's parade marches with zoo animals. November 27th, 1924. The first Macy's parade happens. And here's the fun part. There are no balloons. Instead, there are live animals from the Central Park Zoo. Imagine waking up for Thanksgiving and seeing an elephant, a camel, and a bear casually strolling down Broadway like they're late for brunch. Nothing says holiday cheer like the possibility of a zebra panicking and sprinting into Herald Square. But this parade marks the birth of Thanksgiving as the launch pad for Christmas consumerism. Because when Santa arrives at the end of the parade, so does capitalism. And capitalism wins. Segment 11. Harvey Milk and George Moscone are assassinated. November 27th, 1978. San Francisco becomes a crime scene. Dan White sneaks into City Hall through a basement window like a man who forgot how doors work, kills Mayor Moscone, reloads, then executes Harvey Milk. The city is devastated. Dianne Feinstein discovers the bodies, makes the announcement, and suddenly the LGBTQ+ movement has a martyr. That night, 40,000 people march in silence with candles, a moment of grief that becomes a moment of power. A year later, the absurd Twinkie defense sparks riots and becomes a symbolic breaking point. November 27th becomes the day a community stops hiding and starts marching. Segment 12. From Zarathustra to Rocky IV to Disney princesses. November 27th is also culturally stacked. Richard Strauss premieres Also sprach Zarathustra in 1896, which becomes the soundtrack of evolution thanks to 2001, A Space Odyssey. And for modern America, November 27th is prime box office time. Rocky IV releases in 1985 and becomes the most Cold War thing besides the Cold War itself. Decades later, Thanksgiving weekend becomes the domain of Frozen, Toy Story 2, Moana, The Hobbit, and every film designed to entertain children while parents negotiate emotional armistices at the dinner table. In conclusion, November 27th is the day history busts down the door like Dan White entering City Hall, like Pope Urban shouting Deus Vult, like Clovis's sons arguing over who gets what piece of Europe, like Alfred Nobel trying to erase a lifetime of explosions, like Celsius flipping the temperature scale on its head, like St. James proving that guilt trips are deadlier than kings. It's a day of disruption, reinvention, tragedy, miracles, scientific leaps, political assassinations, and occasionally a parade featuring animals who would definitely prefer not to be involved. November 27th reminds us that history isn't neat, tidy, or polite. It's chaotic, dramatic, messy, and sometimes downright strange, just like the people who make it. And that is why we keep coming back to days like this. Because buried in the madness is the story of who we are, how we got here, and why time should really consider taking a holiday off.